Hundreds of youngsters went to Oxford Street on Wednesday after viral TikTok videos encouraged them to loot the stores.
Dear viewer, we have just received the latest breaking news. Viewer, today's video is going to be extremely important, so we kindly request that no one skip the video and watch it attentively. Let's now watch the video carefully on the screen.
And 34 dispersal orders were enforced. One of Britain's busiest streets forced to shut down in broad daylight, Oxford Street, London. Hundreds of teenagers surged in after a viral TikTok call to loot stores. Shutters came down and shoppers were trapped inside. Police flooded the street, but only after the crowds arrived. This did not happen by accident. The warnings were online, the pressure was visible, and yet nothing in the system adjusted in time. What you are seeing is not just a riot sparked by social media. It happens when pressure outpaces the systems meant to contain it. Tonight, we are not asking who showed up on Oxford Street. We are asking why the system keeps letting moments like this happen. Earlier that afternoon, Oxford Street was still fully open. No restrictions, no cordons. By mid-afternoon, groups of teenagers began gathering along the street. As the afternoon slipped out of control, some shops managed to react in time, pulling their shutters down as crowds pressed closer. According to reports, other stores were entered and looted by the groups wearing dark clothing and face coverings. Some shops reported attempts to force open their shutters, but these efforts were unsuccessful. The extent of the damage has not yet been assessed. As daylight began to fade, police lines gradually formed. Stop and search began. Short, decisive commands were issued. The space tightened. Several individuals were restrained, handcuffs applied, pulled out of the crowd. Shouts rose, then faded. Police vehicles edged in slowly through packed bodies. The street was contained, but not cleared. Police were present, yet pressure did not ease. Businesses wanted to stay open, but did not dare. There was no early decision to shut the situation down. Only piecemeal enforcement, moment by moment. What happened here is not an exception. It is a warning of a system already falling behind events. Oxford Street was not a standalone incident. It was a warning. What broke out on one street is now surfacing across multiple systems at once. Public order is no longer shaped in advance. Intervention arrives late, and by then, momentum belongs to disorder. This pattern repeats beyond policing. Population pressure now sits at the centre of the strain. Intake continues while enforcement capacity, policing resources, and local services fail to scale in step. Pressure is not resolved. It is deferred downward, absorbed by councils, neighbourhoods, and frontline services already operating at their limits. This is where tension spills into the streets. Protests, disorder, and flashpoints do not emerge in isolation. They surface where population pressure meets weak enforcement and delayed response. Housing policy follows the same logic. Targets expand, delivery falls behind, build rates lag ambition, infrastructure trails demand, pressure is pushed into areas already stretched, and congestion spreads outward into transport, retail, and public space. Progress exists on paper. On the ground, strain deepens. Fiscal pressure rises alongside it. Costs increase. Taxes climb. Yet the public struggles to see which forms of stability are being protected first. Spending grows, but clarity shrinks. When people cannot see what their money delivers, trust erodes. Since the Keir Starmer government took office, public trust has fallen by 38%. Official figures show reported crime rising by 22% across key categories. Net migration remains at 52%, while enforcement outcomes continue to lag behind intake. Policies are defended in isolation. The system bears the combined consequences. They absorb everything at once. When alignment breaks, pressure does not disperse, it accumulates. And accumulated pressure is how manageable strain turns into systemic instability. System failure rarely announces itself with collapse. It reveals itself through erosion. City centres become harder to read. Shops close earlier. Staff hesitate over late shifts. Foot traffic thins, routines shorten. None of this feels dramatic on its own, but together it reshapes how people move, work and spend time. Normal life contracts quietly. Police presence begins to feel temporary rather than reassuring. Officers arrive, pressure eases, then reappears somewhere else. Control feels situational. Authority feels conditional. Over time, reassurance gives way to caution. People comply not because they trust order will hold, but because they hope disruption will pass. Institutions drift from prevention toward containment. Emergency responses become routine. Measures once described as temporary begin to feel permanent. Stability is no longer assumed. It is negotiated day by day, location by location. Behaviour adapts downward. People leave earlier, avoid certain routes, choose predictability over convenience. Expectations lower, not because anyone told them to, but because experience teaches them to adjust. This is the real cost of systemic misalignment. It is not measured only in arrests or budgets. It is measured in the shrinking of normal life. When routines narrow, confidence narrows with them. Once confidence erodes, restoring it becomes far harder than restoring order. Streets can be cleared quickly. Trust cannot. Trust rebuilds slowly, if at all. Once people stop assuming stability is the default, there is a lesson here, and it is not ideological. It is structural. Pressure itself is not the problem. Pressure is inevitable. Systems fail when they lose the ability to absorb pressure coherently and early. Timing matters because tempo matters. When action consistently arrives late, authority loses rhythm. Once tempo is surrendered, force becomes a substitute for foresight. Containment replaces prevention. Reaction replaces design. Capacity matters because ambition without delivery breeds congestion. Targets, intake levels and fiscal commitments mean little unless they are aligned with build speed, enforcement bandwidth and service resilience. Alignment is not optional. It is the foundation of stability. Coordination matters because fragmentation multiplies risk. When each part of government manages its own crisis, pressure stacks instead of dispersing. No single decision breaks the system. Misalignment does. Clarity matters because consent depends on understanding. People accept cost when they can see what stability it buys. When priorities are opaque, trust dissolves. Cost without visible order breeds resentment, not resilience. Trust itself is infrastructure. It is built through predictability, consistency and early action. Once lost, it cannot be replaced by force alone. Force can contain disorder. It cannot restore confidence. These are not radical demands, they are the basics of governance. Ignore them and systems drift from governing toward permanent crisis management. What Oxford Street revealed was not a crowd problem, it was a system problem. When prevention lags, capacity misaligns, coordination fragments and priorities blur, incidents stop being exceptions, they become signals. Signals that pressure is no longer being shaped, only managed after damage is visible. Under the current governing approach, pressure is repeatedly addressed after it surfaces rather than designed out beforehand. That choice carries consequences paid quietly and repeatedly by ordinary people adapting their lives downward. This is not a call for panic. It is a call for competence, for systems that move together, for decisions that arrive before disruption, not after it spreads, for governance that restores tempo rather than chasing events. A functioning state does not rely on containment as the default condition. It relies on alignment, foresight, and trust earned through consistency. When those elements weaken, force fills the gap briefly, expensively, and imperfectly. If these lessons continue to be ignored, moments like Oxford Street will not remain isolated. They will recur in different forms, in different places, each time feeling more familiar, more routine, and less shocking. Familiarity is how instability becomes normal. For clear, structured analysis of how systems drift and how they can be brought back into balance, stay with us. Subscribe for what comes next. Understanding that distinction is the first step toward reform. Because when policies fail, the real question is not who reacted last, but who designed the system that made failure inevitable. How do we measure accountability when decisions collapse at the top, yet their consequences are always absorbed by everyday life? That is the question our next analyses will continue to examine.